Hey, I'm Jason Riccardi, and we are excited that you have decided to check in with us today. Temple Baptist Church, Temple Student Ministries. I'm the student minister here at Temple Baptist. Thank you for coming in. Now, I've got just a couple of announcements that I want to run through. We're going to be doing our Ignite service here in just a minute, and beyond that, we've got a big event coming up in February 12th, 13th, and 14th. February 12th, 13th, and 14th. I've actually already got all my spots reserved. I'm going to check with the camp to see if we can get additional spots for that retreat that we're going to. But we're going to be taking our students and we're going to go skiing on February 12th, 13th, and 14th. $150 doesn't even cover the cost of the camp, and we do that because we love you and we want you to have an opportunity to do that. But if you are interested, get in touch with me now, ASAP, as soon as possible, so that I can get with the camp and make sure that they still have spots available and then get put on a wait list. And then maybe we can add additional spots. But we have actually booked up all of the spots there. And that's coming up February 12th, 13th, and 14th. We're going to have a ton of fun. We're going to have an opportunity to go skiing. We're going to have an opportunity to go snowboarding, something like that. And just fellowship and worship together. It's going to be good stuff. Beyond that, we have a couple of different ways that you can check in with us. We have got a Temple Student Ministries Facebook page. We've got a Temple Student Ministry Instagram account, Temple Student Ministry on YouTube, or you can go to templetoday.com, find out some more information about us there. But those are some of the ways that you can check in with us online. Now, with that being said, man, we're done with all the stuff that we have to talk about. Let's get into the really good stuff. Let's spend some time in God's Word today. And our series for the year is it's belief. What can I trust? And the main verse is John 20:31. And in that verse it says that, but these things are written so that you may believe. So that's talking about the Gospel of John. And the whole Gospel of John is written, and they picked stories from Jesus' life for the very purpose of you being able to believe in Jesus. Now, that is just a picture of not just what God has done in the Gospel of John through the life of Jesus, but it's really a picture of what God has done with the entire Bible, and how it reveals things about God, things about nature, things about you, things about me, things about our universe that we need to know about. And so we're going to spend some time in that this year. We're going to spend some time finding out who God is, what He wants from my life. You know, what is sin? Why does that even matter? And we're going to spend some time wrestling with some of these deeper topics. And so our theme verse is John 20:31. The Bible is written so that we can know God. And one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, the big idea that we're going to talk about is that God shows Himself for your good. God shows Himself for your good, and God shows Himself for my good as well. Now, to kind of begin to talk about this, I want to introduce this idea of truth tonight. And I got a couple of funny slides there, a couple of thought-provoking slides, hopefully. But they're probably people they're so old that you don't even have any idea who they are, but you know, the thought behind it still actually stands good. And so let me introduce some of these ideas about truth. Our former president, James A. Garfield, said this: the truth will set you free. Now that sounds an awful lot like something Jesus said, because that is something that Jesus said. So James A. Garfield took something that Jesus said and he says, the truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. That's super awesome. So as soon as I learn truth, it's gonna set me free, but I'll be miserable up until that point. That's awesome. Okay, well here's another guy. This may be somebody that you're a little bit more familiar with. Maybe you have watched Enola Holmes on I think it's on Netflix or Amazon. I can't remember which one, but maybe you've watched Enola Holmes. Well, that's the story of Enola Holmes, who is the sister of Sherlock Holmes, the famous Sherlock Holmes detective stories. So that guy, Arthur Conan Doyle, wrote those books, and he said, once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. So when you wipe away everything that's impossible and whatever is there, that has to be the truth, no matter how hard it seems to believe. Arthur Conan Doyle said that. Here's another one right here. You guys may be familiar with this. This is Mark Twain. You've probably had to read the book Huckleberry Finn when you were growing up. He wrote that book and a lot of other stuff. He's really old guy, long dead now, had a super sweet mustache. Look him up. But anyway, he said, I tell you the truth. Or if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. That's pretty good advice. So students, if you're caught in a difficult circumstance and you got to tell the truth, or you could tell a lie to get you out of something, it's a whole lot easier to just tell the truth in that moment in time because you don't have to remember the lie that you told. And that's what Mark Twain is getting at here. Here's another one that we're kind of, you may be familiar with. There's this guy, Jerome K. Jerome. You have no idea who it is, so don't get hung up on who this is. But he said something really funny. He said, "It is always the best policy to speak the truth. Unless, of course, you're an exceptionally good liar." So that's pretty funny. So speak the truth unless you're a really good liar and you can get away with it. I don't know what kind of sound advice that is or not, but he said that. He's long dead. How about this guy right here? This guy, Oscar Wilde, movies, stuff like that, a long time ago. "The truth is rarely pure and never simple." And man, that is still something that we can hold on to today, because with all the chaos going on in our world today, we can see images and a picture is worth 1,000 words, but those 1,000 words don't really explain what's going on. And so when we see things, when we see images online, the truth behind the image is rarely pure, and it is never simple. Oscar Wilde said that. Here's another one. You guys have probably never seen this movie. This was really famous back in the day. And so you have this guy, Jack Nicholson. He says this phrase, "You want the truth? You can't handle the truth." Phenomenal, epic scene. And so there's this idea of truth. And lots of people have all these different perspectives of truth. And so maybe you can't handle the truth. Maybe the truth is making you miserable. Maybe you're an exceptional liar and you don't feel like saying the truth. Or maybe you should just stick to truth like Mark Twain said. Then you have to remember the lie that you told. Well, that kind of introduces us to this idea. What is the truth that we want to talk about tonight? What is the truth that we want to talk about tonight? And the big idea that I told you earlier was that God shows himself for your good. That's the truth that we want to hold on to tonight. Now, the first part of that is the truth that the Bible is going to reveal to us tonight says something about God. And so this first part, it is God. And so we're going to be in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 23. Romans 1, 18 through 23. In this first verse, we're going to focus on what it kind of begins to open up our minds and our ideas about what God is. And it says this right here in Romans 1:18. "For God's wrath is revealed from heaven against all godlessness and unrighteousness of people who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth." The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all godlessness and unrighteousness of people who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Wow, that is a mouthful. Paul was a really smart guy, way smarter than I am, and so I have to slow down and really think about what he's doing there. And so there's this God that's described here, and this God that's described says that he's just really angry. And so you have to begin to ask yourself, why is God so angry? I mean, that's not the God that we think we know, right? You think, oh, that's an Old Testament God. He was angry all the time. He's a cranky old man. And in the New Testament, Jesus was just love, 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 love. So maybe they're not even the same God. But this passage of Scripture was written in the New Testament. And so we see there's not a disconnect between the Old Testament God, who you may think is just angry all the time, and the New Testament God, who's just love all the time. It's the same God. And so we have to ask ourselves, why is God so angry? Well, the world that we live in is kind of messed up, right? You don't have to go any further back than the last week to see that our world is messed up, right? We have racial and social and political issues all over the place. We see one set of riots and we say, those riots are terrible. I can't believe that they're throwing Molotov cocktails at the Nashville courthouse. That is ridiculous. What about the COVID mask requirement and all these no longer gathering in groups of this number? And we like to say, those are bad. I can't believe that they did those riots back then. And then, oh, hey, what about the riots at the Capitol? People died. People, in essence, in some ways, did an act of terrorism against the Capitol. And so we've got a lot of stuff going on. And we got a world that's really chaotic, racial, social, political. We can't get people together. We can't get a Republican and a Democrat in the same room to agree about anything. If our lives depended on it, they would disagree. And so we have a lot of issues. Not only that, we have natural issues. And by that I mean we've got stuff like hurricanes, That's crazy. Like the number of hurricanes that keep hitting the coast, specifically the Gulf Coast, and a lot of times on the East Coast, a hurricane will go all the way up the coast and just destroy everything, or it'll go right into the Gulf Coast. It'll just devastate all these properties that are there. And then we have global warming. We have all this crazy stuff that we're dealing with today. The world is messed up. The world is messed up on, racial, social, political level, and it's messed up on national or natural levels, but it's also messed up on moral issues. And what do I mean by moral issues? Well, there's this famous Supreme Court ruling, and they were trying to determine what was pornography, what is inappropriate. And the famous quote of the justice was, "I don't know what pornography is, but I'll know it when I see it." So we can't even agree what pornography is, and we can't even agree when we agree that there is such a thing as pornography, and we could say that is definitely pornography. We don't even agree that that's bad. And so we've got a moral chaos in the world. Our moral compass is just flat broken. And so we see this God who has his wrath pouring out on the world, and you're like, well, that's kind of a punk move. Why is God so angry all the time? Well, of course he's angry. This chaos that we experience, the difficulty that goes along with that, the confusion that goes along with which life matters, which protest is good. Why do we experience evil like natural disasters? Why do I feel so weird in my body? Why do I feel like I'm not who I'm supposed to be? And some people begin to question, why do I feel like another gender? Why am I attracted to people of the same gender? And we have all this chaos going on in our lives. And God's angry because that's not what he wanted for us. God wanted far better things for us. So this passage of Scripture reveals something about God. He's upset at sin because of the effect that it has on you, the effect that it has on me, the effect that it has on the entire world. He's upset about that. That's not what he wanted for us. When he created the world perfect. He wanted good things for you and good things for me. And so God is angry because of that. And then there's a truth that is being suppressed by people, and we have to understand, what is this truth that is being suppressed? And in essence, the truth that's being suppressed is that we don't even think that there is such a thing as a God. There's not such thing as a God. There's no reason that we're supposed to believe that there's a God. I'm my God. You be your God. Hindu gods are all good. Muslim gods are all good. We're all gods. Or there's no God at all. And the only God that we have is science. And we're not going to call it God. We're going to call it natural selection. There's nothing like that. But that's the very truth that Paul is talking about as being suppressed here. And the next section that we're going to read goes a little bit different, a little bit deeper with that idea of truth. And so we're going to find ourselves in Romans chapter 1, verses 19 through 20. And so we saw that God revealed himself in the first part there, but God reveals a little bit more about himself in this next one. So God shows himself. And in Romans 1, verses 19 through 20, it says this right here. Since what can be known about God is evident among them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, and being understood through what he has made. As a result, people are without excuse. I have an excuse for every day of the week. Some people have said excuses are like the backside of your body. Everybody has one and they all smell funny. So what is this idea of truth, and why are we without excuse? Well, what is truth, and who showed truth? Let me show you guys a couple of images here that'll kind of help this. The truth that's being talked about here is that there is a God who made everything. Now, you may get wrapped up in your own world, your own life. I've done that myself. Maybe you're in high school and you think, there's nothing beyond White House, Tennessee. There is nothing beyond my team, the football team, the basketball team, cheerleading, track, baseball, softball, whatever it is that you find yourself doing, soccer, wrestling, whatever. There is nothing beyond that sport that you do. And yet, in NASA, our aeronautics program, years ago, sent this camera into space so that we could study space. And one of the last images that it took, as you see on the screen there, is something that's titled the pale blue dot. And as you're looking at that image, that little bitty dot in that band of light is Earth. Kind of gives you a little bit of perspective. And so when you see Earth, billions of people, Earth is so tiny that you can hardly see it. It puts perspective in life, doesn't it? It means that God is really big. There is something in our universe that's bigger than me, that's bigger than my sport team, that's bigger than the fact that I like that guy or I like that girl. It's bigger than anything that we can experience. And if the world, the universe is so big, there's got to be a God that put that all together. It's evidence of the fact that there's a God. And so this is the truth that Paul is talking about here in Romans 1. But not only that, there's truth that's revealed about God in the course of history. Now, we don't have to go back very far in the course of history to see God at work. And there's a couple of movies that have been made recently that I think are going to be kind of helpful. Well, there was this story of the Battle of Dunkirk. And this the movie Dunkirk, which was done just a few years ago, there's 400,000 soldiers that are surrounded by the enemy. 400,000 soldiers surrounded by the enemy. That's the town of White House times 20. The town of White House, no, not times 20, times 200. The town of White House times 200. 400,000. Actually, this times 20. The size of White House times 20. So 20 White Houses surrounded by the enemy. There's no way out. The only way off of this island is by boat. And you have an enemy that has superior jet coverage. You have an enemy that has boats in the water surrounding you. You have an enemy that is going to be around you on the backside. There's no escape. And yet, God saved those soldiers. And it turned the tides of World War II. 400,000 souls were saved. God was at work in that. The people that experienced that pointed to God. Now the movie Dunkirk is not a Christian movie, so just be aware of that when you watch it, but that's evidence of God working in history to save men, to save lives. And there's another movie that was done just recently, and it's actually a remake of one from way back in time, the Battle of Midway. And in the Battle of Midway, this was a naval battle that just completely turned the tides of World War II. And in this battle, and 6 months before this battle, our naval base in Hawaii was just decimated. Our naval base in Hawaii was decimated by a surprise bombing by Japan. It almost crippled us. It almost kept us from going into the war to begin with. And then we have this naval battle that's happening at the end of World War II. In June 1942, there's this naval battle, and it seems like we're going to be surprised again by the enemy. And yet, God worked in the midst of that. And our military was outnumbered. Our military was supposed to be surprised by this, and yet our military decimated the Japanese army. They didn't have any more boats, or they couldn't keep up with the pace and the need of boats after we sank so many of their aircraft carriers. They couldn't keep up with the number of men that was needed to actually, make the Navy work for the Japanese Navy. And so they didn't have enough materials. They didn't have enough men. After this battle, it completely changed the complexion of World War II. You might be speaking German today had it not been for this battle. God was at work in history. So God is at work in creation. He's a big God. God is also a small enough God that He works in the midst of history. But there's one more thing that He works in. He works in us as humans. And so you may have had these questions for yourself. Why? Why am I able to reason and to think? I think, therefore I am. That's maybe a phrase that you've heard before. It's a famous phrase, but why do we have the ability to think and reason? Why do we care about our existence? It's something that makes us way different than anything else in this universe. We don't have monkeys. We don't have orangutans. We don't have dogs. We don't have any of those things that are contemplating their existence, that are wondering how they got there, why they're able to think, why their life matters. And yet we do. We're different because God is working in us in a special way. We may begin to wonder where we came from. Animals don't worry about that. Their existence is really small. Our existence is really big because we have a really big God that's working in us. Animals don't worry about who made them, and yet we do. And so knowing that leaves you without excuse. Knowing that there is a God who is really big, who made everything, who has the power to make the universe, who has the power to work in history, who is working in you in a specific way. Just those are things that you can know just by being alive. And knowing that actually puts you without excuse. Now, to kind of illustrate this point, I'm gonna give you an example. Now, let's say you went to Australia. You're visiting Australia. Let's say you're a senior and this is your senior trip. You go to Australia and you begin to think to yourself, man, I've always wanted to go there. And so you go. You're going to go see the Great Barrier Reef. You're going to go see, the Uluru or whatever they call that, Ayers Rock where you can climb up. You want to see the outback. You want to see koalas, all this crazy stuff. You think to yourself, I want to do that. And so you go to Australia and you land in Australia and one of the first vehicles that you encounter, you see the steering wheel is on the other side of the vehicle, and you begin to look at it and you're like, why is the steering wheel on the other side of the vehicle? And you think, well, maybe it's a mail truck and they have to be on that side of the road so that they can actually deliver the mail. And so you get into your rental car and lo and behold, the steering wheel also is on the other side of the car. And so you get in there and you get behind the steering wheel and you're feeling really weird at this point. And so you get in the car and you start driving and you pull out and you're in the right lane instead of the left lane. And you begin to see cars coming at you at 60 miles an hour and you're going 60 miles an hour. So there's fixing to be a collision at 120 miles an hour. And then you swerve out of the right lane into the left lane and you survive that. Now, why would that be a problem? You speak English, but they speak a little bit different English than you do. You drive vehicles, but those vehicles look different. You have the same roads, but those roads and the traffic laws are all different. Why are they different? The reality is that Australia is one of the, 70-something nations out there that actually drive completely opposite of what most of the rest of the world does. And you may not understand why they do that. You may not have the same language where you can read the road signs in the way that they do. You may not believe that that's the best way to do it, but I guarantee you this, if you get in a vehicle and you start driving down the road in Australia, you have to follow the traffic lines. And knowing the traffic laws in Australia, if you're driving in Australia, might be the very thing that keeps you alive. Because if you ignore the traffic laws, you might end up dead. Now, why do I bring this story up? Well, you may be sitting and thinking to yourself, I don't believe that there is a God. Well, in the same way that you go to Australia, you have to follow the traffic laws, whether you want to or not. You have to admit there's a God, whether you want to or not. You may think, well, that's stupid. I don't want to believe that there's a God. Or you may think to yourself, oh, I got science. That's enough of a God. Or, maybe I'll just follow one of these other gods, Hindu, Islam, Mormonism, whatever, one of these, Jainism, another cult or something like that. But you have to admit to yourself, there's something out there that's bigger than you. And admitting that might be the very thing that keeps you from dying. You are still subject to the laws of the land. If you go to Australia, you have to do the law that they do in Australia. You have to follow the traffic laws like they say. You are a human being living on earth. There is a God, and you are subject to the laws of God because it's His land. You may not want to admit that. You may not believe that there's a God, but you live on earth. You are still subject to God's law. So God is a big God that reveals Himself in so many different ways, in creation, in history, in you. and He's in control of you. And that's actually good news. And so we're going to spend a few minutes here in this final passage in Romans 1, 18 through 23. And we're just going to read verses 21, 22, and 23 to finish up here. And I'm almost done, but stick with me for just a few more minutes. God shows Himself, and it is for your good, and it is for my good. And so in Romans 1, verses 21 through 23, it says, "For though they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God or show gratitude. Instead, their thinking became worthless, and their senseless hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, birds, four-footed animals, and reptiles." Now, that's the end of that passage right there. And that's actually good news for you. And so I'm going to slow down. I'm going to look at a couple of things here. It'll be popping up on the screen, and then it'll be in the lower corner there. But there's a couple of things I want to point out to you. Why is it a good thing that we are without excuse? Why are we without excuse? Going back to our analogy where you're driving in Australia, you may not speak the same language. I mean, they speak English, but it's a different kind of English than you speak. So you may not speak the same. You may not understand the stuff that they understand. You might not know why they do what they do. You may not think that it's the right thing to do. You may think it's stupid that they drive on the other side of the road. But if you're visiting there, you have to follow the rules and law of the land. You know enough about God now that you know enough about God to reject Him. When you look outside and you see nature, it's evidence of the fact that there's God. When you look at history, you see how God intervenes in history, and He weaves the story of humanity together to point forward to the cross. And then after the cross, He weaves humanity and history to point back to the cross, because the cross is central to all of creation. And you know enough just by looking outside to know that there's something bigger than you out there. And you have chosen to reject Him in the same way that I've chosen to reject Him. You're without excuse. The problem is that looking outside and knowing that there is a God is not enough for you to be saved. And next week we're going to dive into what it means and how we can know that there is a God that loves us and wants us to be loved by Him and to love Him as well. And so moving beyond just knowing that there is a God that exists, which is what we're talking about tonight. Next week, we're going to talk about how we know more about that God. Now, knowing that there is a God isn't enough for you to get saved. And so you begin to think to yourself, is this something that I can really believe? Is this something worth believing? Is this something worth holding on to? That a God exists and that a God has power and divinity over you. Now, here's the thing. We all worship something. We all worship something. Every single one of us. Put yourself in different situations. You may not be a religious person, and so you don't worship a God. But maybe the thing that you worship is money. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, man, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get the best education that I can possibly get, and then I'm going to get out of school, and I'm going to work really hard, and I'm going to make easy money. Straight cheddar, Holmes. And you think to yourself, it's all about the Benjamins. But it's not. You may have a problem with worshiping money. You may think to yourself, man, money is something in the future. I don't even worry about that right now. I'm just worried about the fact that I look nice. And so you get up. You go to your job, you work hard so that you can get nice things, so you can get nice clothes, so that you can put on the right clothes, you can put on the right brand of clothes, so that you can have the right size, the right fit, the right look, and when you go to school, you can get the right look from that guy or that girl that you're interested in. And you can be popular because you have all the right things. And so maybe it's not money that you worship, but maybe it's nice things, nice clothes. And maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just there's a super hot girl or a super hot guy that you're interested in, and that's the person that you worship. And you find yourself worshiping this person by you're just writing their name all in your notebook and all this stuff, and you're drawing little hearts around, you and this person, and you draw a heart around it, and you think, oh man, my life would just be measurably better if I had them in my life. And so you find yourself actually worshiping that person. All of us worship something. All of the religions in all the world, There's people that worship nature. There's people that worship all these other gods and these made up things. Every single society has some sort of creation narrative. And they all ask the same question: why do we exist? We all worship something. And the thing that we worship is really a reflection of us. So how is it for our good that we know that there's a God that exists, who's bigger than us, that has power and authority over our lives? Why is it a good thing to know that? Here's why it's a good thing. There is a God who is making himself known to you. There is a God who cares about you infinitely. Why is it a good thing that that God is angry? It is a good thing because there is a God who wants good things for you. There's a God who cares about who you are, about what you do, about what you think, about what you say, about what you wear, because he loves you. It's good news that there's a God that exists because he wants you to know him, and he wants to be known by you. It's good things that there's a God who made all this stuff and that reveals himself in nature, in history, in your own experience, because he wants you to know who he is. There is a God that loves you. There is a great big God that's bigger than our little universe in White House, Tennessee, that's bigger than our little universe in Tennessee, that's bigger than our little universe in the United States, that's bigger than our little universe in North America. It's bigger than our little universe in Earth. It's bigger than our little universe in the Milky Way galaxy. There is a God that's way bigger than anything like that. And 85 million miles away from Earth is still smaller than our big God. A God that wants to be known by you. A big God that made himself very small so that you could actually experience him. He came to earth in the person of Jesus because he loves you. So God shows himself for your good. Is that a truth that you can hold on to tonight? Is that a lie, or is that something that you can believe? Let me tell you, it is something that you can believe. There is a God who exists, who wants to be known by you, who makes himself known, who reveals himself. And that's good news because he wants good things for you. And so tonight, I hope that you got a little bit of something out of Scripture tonight. John 20:31, these things are written so that you may know that there is a God that loves you. That's the truth that we want to hold on to tonight. God shows himself for your good. And so, God, we love you, and we thank you for this opportunity to dive into your text. We thank you for this opportunity that you're God that's not a distant God that judges us without actually letting us know what there is. You're not a God that makes things and then steps away and watches the chaos. You're a God that is actively involved in our lives. You're a God that is a big God who loves us and wants what's good for us. And you're a God that gets angry because things are not the way that you wanted them to be. The world is chaotic. We've got racial, social, political, natural, and moral issues that we're all dealing with. And those are things that you get angry about, God, because you know that that is not what is for our good and for your glory. And so we thank you for revealing yourself in all of those things so that we can get to know you. And so, God, as we realize tonight that it is truth, it is not a lie, it is something that we can believe that you exist. And we thank you for that a little bit tonight. And as we dive into the text next week and we realize that there's more to know about you than just what can be revealed in nature, and as we realize that there is a word called the Bible that talks about you, and as we spend some more time in that, as we grow confident in our belief that you exist and that you love us and you want to know us, as we do that, God, we ask that you would just draw us to you more and more. And we love you, God, and we thank you for that. In your name we pray. Amen. Hey, guys, thanks for checking in with us this week. I love you. Peace out.